As your friendly neighborhood God of War mega fan, it's hard to accurately describe just how I felt when Sony pulled a fast one on all of us by revealing the next God of War game at the very end of their most recent PlayStation 5 showcase. The surprise, of course, not really being that the game exists. Everybody who follows gaming even badly would have suspected that, but the surprise here is that they're already talking about it. The God of War soft reboot took many years to make, and even with the understanding that they now have much of the fundamentals in place, you would still think they'd wait a while longer before really talking about this one. At the very least, wait until the PS5 is out and they have more of the game to show. But they opted to spill the beans early, which could imply a few things that we'll get into here. Firstly, the most apparent suspicion that you couldn't be blamed for having is that the next God of War game is closer than perhaps we might have thought. While it is true that this game will be for a completely different console than the previous one, with totally different capabilities and expectations, and that will require some form of an overhaul on the part of Santa Monica, it is also true that they aren't starting from scratch this time, and as a result, they are hopefully avoiding an exorbitantly lengthy development cycle. One thing that is starting to really worry me about these big AAA games is the length of time they take to make, and how it seems to increase every generation. It wasn't looking too bad up until the PS2, Xbox, GameCube generation, but really started to inflate in the 7th and 8th generations as consoles became more and more powerful, and gamers wanted to see that power pushed further and further. Now, we are at a point where many of these development studios can only release 1 or maybe 2 games per generation, and that, I figured, would continue to worsen in the upcoming 9th generation. But if Santa Monica is comfortable with announcing the new God of War game now, that seems to imply that they have figured something out.
Struck a nerve, did I?
Whether that be using old assets from the last game, hiring outside studios to make new ones, or implementing some sort of algorithm to generate the more subtle items like trees and rocks so they can focus on the characters, is of course unknowable at this point to anyone outside of that particular bubble. But no matter what is going on behind the scenes, it does appear that they are targeting 2021, next year, for the follow-up to their 2018 masterpiece. I would say I trust them. But at the same time, delays happen, so I could easily see this ending up in 2022. But either way, knowing we're only a year or two away from the next God of War is exciting news. With a continuation of the thread line of the narrative of the last game, we should also expect a return from much of the cast. Expect more Freya, Mimir, Brok, Sindri, and maybe even some more ghostly apparitions of characters from Kratos' past, although perhaps Mimir can get a new body this time around. Something a little more speculative, but still pretty firmly rooted in reality, is the next game will be a direct sequel to the last game. No indiscernible long stretches of time in the timeline here like we saw between God of War 3 and the 2018 game. The last game left off on such a powerful note, with Faye's ashes finally being released, and if you saw the additional bit after going back home, what appears to be a very ticked-off Thor preparing to do something bad with his hammer. While his hand hovers over it, this is not a thread that Santa Monica is likely to leave hanging in the next game. In fact, seeing as how Kratos killed Thor's 2 sons and his brother Baldur in the previous game, Thor probably has a few issues he would like to hammer out with Kratos, despite Kratos trying his best to not have an axe to grind with him. Okay, no more weapon puns. God of War Ragnarok will almost certainly be called that, as Cory Barlog himself has alluded to on Twitter at least once about a year ago, and the trailer seemed to linger on the word Ragnarok just a little too long before also showing us the words "is coming." To me, this seems like a pretty strong indication about the title of the game, but more importantly, the content of it as well. In Norse mythology, Ragnarok is the complete and total obliteration of the universe, and everything within it. The story of Ragnarok was often mentioned as something that would inevitably happen one day. As a result, people were split on how it affected them and guided their lives. Some saw it as a terrible omen that made everything pointless and served as an excuse to pillage and plunder to their heart's content. Because who cares if everything is going to be invalidated anyway? while others saw it as a reason to treat each other with dignity and accomplish as many acts of nobility as they could. So perhaps we could see those two conflicting ideologies emerge in the next God of War game. Characters like Atreus and Mimir may hold the latter view that sees Ragnarok as an opportunity to do good, while characters like Freya, who have had everything taken from them, might have the view of seeking revenge where they desire it. This could be a wonderful way to encapsulate Freya's, or Thor's, revenge against Kratos, through the lens of Ragnarok and what it means to different characters. Where Kratos stands on it and how he chooses to handle it could be the singularity that tips the entire balance one way or the other. As we have come to expect with God of War at this point, we should expect a story of loss, redemption, revenge, and facing your ultimate fate. These are themes that permeate all of the God of War games, and while certain games use them a little differently, and frankly some do a much better job than others at handling them, they are the cornerstones of the series. Whenever Kratos runs from his problems, it makes everything horrible for everyone around him, including himself. But whenever he confronts them head-on, like he finally did at the end of God of War 3 and throughout much of God of War 18, it leads to profound growth. Whether it be a challenge of taking his own life to stop a cycle of violence, or just figuring out how to raise a son, Kratos is at his best when he's overcoming things. This is something that we could likely expect to see Kratos go through in the next game as well. How he continues to handle Atreus, somebody who has shown the propensity to get cocky and make mistakes, or how he handles the burdens of Ragnarok will all be significantly important elements to the story of the next game. As a result, I would expect a lot of exploration in those areas, with perhaps some unexpected twists here and there. Whatever the next God of War game brings us, odds are good it's going to be something special, and probably worth getting a PS5 for if you hadn't by that time. I, for one, couldn't be more excited to see where everything lands with it.
We're so close to the end now.
Yes. Yes, we are.
That's it for this video. If you enjoyed and would like to see more, feel free to hit that subscribe button and hit the notification bell to ensure you'll be notified when new videos go up.